Rock Hudson, Tony Curtis, even Shelley Winters had something to say. Behind the Hollywood gloss, Burt Lancaster's relationships told a story the studios buried. If it ever got out, it would have blown the golden age wide open. Early life and circus days. Burt Lancaster was born on the 2nd of November 1913 in East Harlem. His parents were Irish working-class New Yorkers. His father worked for the Postal Service, and his mother ran the home. He grew up tough, restless, and athletic. School bored him. He spent more time climbing street poles and flipping over fences than reading books. By age 19, Lancaster had joined the K Brothers Circus. He wasn't just an acrobat, he was a headliner. He performed with his lifelong friend Nick Cravat, a fellow New Yorker he met in the gym. They trained together, slept in tents, and traveled the country by train, putting on fast-paced tumbling acts that wowed small-town crowds. Their timing was flawless. Their trust ran deep. The circus wasn't glamorous, but it gave Lancaster something Hollywood couldn't teach: control over his body, charm on cue, and comfort with danger. He learned how to perform for people sitting 30 feet away who couldn't hear a word. Everything had to be big, clear, and unforgettable. When the Depression hit, circus work dried up. Lancaster bounced between odd jobs: truck driver, meat packer, even singing waiter. He briefly got into NYU on an athletic scholarship but dropped out. He wanted movement, not lectures. During World War II, he served in the Army's Special Services Division, performing in plays and variety shows for the troops. He kept doing flips in front of tents instead of training with rifles. His act was so good, officers kept him out of combat. After the war, Cravat stayed in his corner. The two reunited in movies like The Flame and the Arrow and The Crimson Pirate, where Cravat, who never spoke on screen, played his silent, stunt-heavy sidekick. It was their circus act all over again, just with brighter costumes and cameras rolling. Lancaster's screen presence came from those circus years. He didn't fake swagger. He earned it in sawdust rings and train cars. The discipline, balance, and showmanship never left him. He and Cravat were inseparable for decades, both on and off screen, but there's no record of anything romantic between them, just loyalty, grit, and a shared history too rare to fake. That bond set the stage for everything that followed. Hollywood breakthrough in 1946. In 1945, Burt Lancaster was working as a salesman in Los Angeles when a casting agent spotted him. He wasn't acting, he wasn't trying. But his look, broad shoulders, confident stance were hard to ignore. The agent asked if he'd ever considered film. Lancaster said he'd give it a shot. That offer led to a screen test, then to a starring role. By 1946, he was front and center in The Killers, opposite Ava Gardner. He was 32, had no acting background, and crushed the role. His performance as the Swede was quiet, menacing, and magnetic. The Killers was a noir hit, and critics locked on to Lancaster's stillness, how he could dominate a scene without saying much. He wasn't a trained actor, but his circus years gave him a physical confidence other stars didn't have. Studios came calling, fast, but instead of signing a long-term contract like most actors did, Lancaster did something bold. He stayed independent. He took short deals and kept his options open. That gave him freedom. Within 2 years, he'd launched his own production company, and by the early 1950s, Hecht Hill Lancaster was producing some of the most talked-about films in town. The real power in Hollywood didn't sit in the spotlight, and Lancaster knew exactly where to find it. He became a regular at private parties where actors, writers, and directors gathered behind closed doors. The events were exclusive and guarded. During this time, he reportedly grew close to Rock Hudson. Hudson wasn't a major name yet, but the two moved in similar circles. Both were tall, charismatic, and carefully managed by the studios. They shared a need for privacy, especially in a town that watched everything. Lancaster never acted like a new star. He walked in like he'd always belonged. One film in, and he had already rewritten the Hollywood playbook. Marriage to Norma Anderson. The same year The Killers made him famous, Burt Lancaster married Norma Anderson in 1946. They tied the knot in Yuma, Arizona, just as his career was catching fire. The timing wasn't ideal. He was suddenly working nonstop, traveling for press and taking meetings with producers who wanted him in every war drama and noir thriller being made. Norma, a former actress herself, stepped back from the spotlight to raise their family. They went on to have 5 children, 3 sons and 2 daughters. At home, Lancaster was known to be strict but affectionate. He expected discipline and hard work, values he had grown up with in Harlem and carried with him through the circus and the army. But fame changes things. Lancaster's career demanded long hours and long absences. By the 1950s, stories were floating around about affairs with both women and, more quietly, men. Norma never went public with details, but a few secondary sources have claimed she once accused him of being romantically involved with both sexes. Those claims never came with direct quotes, and no interviews with Norma exist to confirm them. Still, the whispers lingered. Their marriage lasted over 2 decades, but the cracks were visible. Lancaster had a strong sense of independence. He once said in an interview that he didn't believe in being caged by anyone, which didn't exactly line up with being a family man. Friends said Norma was loyal and patient, but eventually the stress and distance became too much. They officially divorced in 1969. It wasn't a public mess, no tabloid blow-ups or court drama, just a quiet end to a long, complicated marriage. Lancaster kept the details private, as he always did, but the emotional weight was obvious. He rarely spoke about Norma afterward. Despite the rumors, nothing concrete ever proved Lancaster's relationships with men. Still, Norma's quiet presence in his life, then her equally quiet departure, left behind questions people still ask. Was she covering for him? Was she protecting herself? Or was it just a Hollywood marriage stretched too thin? What's certain is this. For over the 2nd of December AIDS, Norma Anderson was part of the Lancaster story. The part not seen on screen. The one without applause. Friendship with Rock Hudson. By the 1950s, he was an A-lister with his own production company, and Rock Hudson was Hollywood's next rising star. Hudson's breakthrough came with Magnificent Obsession in 1954, and by then, he and Lancaster were already crossing paths at private industry events. Their friendship wasn't flashy, but it ran deep enough to catch notice behind the scenes. Both men were tall, broad-shouldered, and commanding on screen. Off-screen, they were known to attend discreet parties thrown by directors, producers, and agents who catered to stars living outside the public mold. These events were designed to keep certain things quiet. The press wasn't invited. What happened there stayed there. In 1960, an FBI memo mentioned both Lancaster and Hudson in connection to a raid on a Beverly Hills mansion. The report described the property as hosting unusual gatherings involving prominent actors. No charges were filed, no names were released to the public, but the memo still made its way into Lancaster's file, which already included notes on his political activism. Lancaster never commented on the memo or any rumors about his connection to the party. Hudson, who later faced enormous pressure to hide his identity, also stayed silent. But insiders who worked in the industry during the 52nd and 62nd have described both men as part of a quiet, protective network. Stars like Hudson, Montgomery Clift, and others navigated a system where being seen in the wrong place could end a career. Lancaster's friendship with Hudson stayed out of the spotlight, but it lasted decades. They never starred in a film together, never gave joint interviews, never posed for staged photos. But they were often seen arriving at the same estates, slipping into the same rooms, and leaving out the back when the night was over. FBI surveillance in the 1950s. While Lancaster was rising in Hollywood, his name was quietly making its way into federal files. The FBI under J. Edgar Hoover was tracking actors, directors, and writers suspected of communist sympathies or deviant behavior, as the reports called it. Lancaster fit the profile, politically outspoken, fiercely independent, and socially connected to people Hoover didn't trust. His file wasn't thin. It included notes on his liberal activism, his vocal stance against McCarthyism, and his public support for civil rights. But what raised more eyebrows inside the Bureau were the repeated tips, often anonymous, that questioned his private life. Some claimed he attended gatherings of concern. Others listed him among male guests at parties under unofficial watch. There were no arrests and formal investigations, but the surveillance was constant. Reports mentioned his friendships, his travel partners, and his presence at homes already tagged by the FBI for hosting other suspected figures. None of it was public. The press never caught wind. But Hoover's people took notes. One 1955 memo, now declassified, flagged Lancaster as a subject of interest due to associations with known political radicals and participation in suspect social events. The language was vague on purpose. Agents often avoided naming specific activities. They preferred implication. In Lancaster's case, it was always about proximity, who he stood next to, who he shook hands with, and who he called a friend. Despite the file growing, Lancaster didn't change his behavior. He kept marching in protests, funding independent films, and defending artists blacklisted for leftist views. If he knew the FBI was watching, and he likely did, he didn't let it stop him. Hollywood insiders believed the Bureau kept quiet because Lancaster was too powerful to confront directly. He was bankable, respected, and already beyond the control of studio heads. Going after him would have caused a storm. But the surveillance never stopped. Through the 50-second and 60-second, Hoover's obsession with policing Hollywood's morality left marks on dozens of stars. Lancaster just happened to be one of the few who kept moving forward under the radar on his own terms and without apology. The file stayed open, but he never flinched. Alleged affair with Tony Curtis. On the set of Sweet Smell of Success in 1957, something clicked between Burt Lancaster and Tony Curtis. The film was sharp, moody, and cold, and so was their chemistry. Lancaster played J.J. Hunsaker, a ruthless columnist, while Curtis took on the role of a desperate press agent. They were electric on screen, too electric, some said. Rumors started almost immediately. Crew members whispered about how close the two actors had gotten between takes. They ate meals together, rehearsed late, and sometimes disappeared for hours. Neither man addressed the speculation, but the stories never fully went away. Curtis's 2008 memoir, American Prince, revealed his own bisexuality, though he never confirmed any romantic involvement with Lancaster. Still, he did say Lancaster was impossible to ignore and commanded every room he entered. That kind of phrasing didn't stop people from reading between the lines. Their scenes in Sweet Smell only fueled the gossip. Curtis's character is practically begging for Lancaster's approval throughout the film, eyes wide and voice pleading. Lancaster, in turn, keeps a cool, calculating distance. Critics called it brilliant acting. Fans called it something else entirely. Off-camera, the two shared a tense but respectful working relationship. Curtis admired Lancaster's discipline. Lancaster reportedly saw Curtis as a talented but unpredictable performer. They didn't do another film together, but they remained friendly for years. It didn't help that Lancaster was already the subject of quiet speculation in Hollywood circles. His close friendships, his guarded private life, and his habit of attending tightly controlled parties had people talking. Add Tony Curtis young, striking, and newly famous to the mix, and the rumors took on a life of their own. Still, there was no proof. No letters, no photos, no statements. Just timing, energy, and one very memorable performance. If something more happened, they took it to the grave. What's left is the film. Two actors locked in a power game, staring each other down in smoke-filled rooms, cutting each other with words. Shelley Winters claims. Shelley didn't hold back in her 1980 autobiography. She named names, spilled affairs, and gave Hollywood readers more than they bargained for. In the middle of it all was Burt Lancaster. According to Winters, the two had a passionate off and on relationship that stretched through the 1950s while he was still married. She described him as magnetic and unpredictable, one moment charming, the next cold. She claimed their connection went beyond the physical, but admitted it was never stable. He came and went, emotionally and physically. She called him a man who kept most of himself locked behind a door no one could open. Winters never accused Lancaster of being dishonest about who he was. In fact, she hinted at the opposite, that he was open-minded, experimental, and unwilling to be boxed in by the expectations of 1950s masculinity. She stopped short of saying he was bisexual, but left the door wide open with lines like, "He lived a bigger life than most people could imagine." Their relationship was never a secret in Hollywood circles. They were seen at restaurants, premieres, and parties together. But the depth of it, how long it lasted, what it meant wasn't clear until her book came out. By then, Lancaster had already moved on from his marriage, and Winters was decades past caring about scandal. Readers picked up on the subtext. She was describing a man torn between two worlds, one of control and public image and one of private complexity. She never made accusations, just observations. And she made it clear that Lancaster wasn't a man to explain himself. If people wanted answers, they weren't going to get them from him. Her account added a layer of intimacy to the rumors already swirling. It wasn't just speculation from tabloids or whispers from assistants. It was coming from someone who knew him behind closed doors. Someone who wasn't afraid to say he wasn't easy, wasn't simple, and didn't fit the mold. Shelley Winters told her truth. Whether Lancaster agreed with it or not, he never responded publicly. That was his way. Let them talk. He'd just keep walking. Vince Eager's 1958 encounter. He wasn't a movie star. He was a young British singer on the rise, part of the late 1950s rock and roll wave in the UK. In a 2017 interview with the Nottingham Post, he recalled one night in 1958 that never left him. He was 18. Burt Lancaster was 45 and visiting London. According to Eager, they crossed paths in a Soho nightclub popular with entertainers and agents. Eager was sitting at the bar when Lancaster approached him, friendly but direct. The actor complimented his look, asked a few questions, and then allegedly offered him a role in an upcoming film. The offer came with a condition: Eager would have to spend the night with him. Caught off guard, Eager turned him down. He said Lancaster's mood shifted instantly. What started as charm turned into anger. Lancaster allegedly called him ungrateful and stormed off. Eager said he never told anyone at the time. He didn't want the attention, and Lancaster was too big to challenge. The story stayed buried for decades. Eager never wrote a book, never shopped a screenplay. He told the story casually nearly 60 years later while talking about his time in the music business. The reporter didn't even ask about Lancaster. Eager brought him up on his own. No one else has confirmed the encounter. There are no records, photos, or second-hand accounts. Lancaster's estate never responded, and no journalist has been able to verify the details. But Eager stuck by it. He said the moment was brief but unforgettable, and that he never watched a Lancaster film the same way again. What makes the story hard to dismiss is its lack of drama. Eager wasn't angry. He wasn't even trying to accuse Lancaster of anything criminal. He just told the story as it happened, or as he remembered it. A strange night, an unexpected proposition, a quick rejection. AIDS advocacy with Hudson. In 1985, Rock Hudson publicly revealed that he was battling AIDS. It shocked the industry. He was the first major Hollywood star to come forward, and the announcement shattered decades of silence around both his sexuality and the epidemic itself. While many distanced themselves, one of the few big names who didn't flinch was Burt Lancaster. That same year, Lancaster appeared at a Hollywood fundraiser for AIDS Project Los Angeles. He didn't just show up, but took the stage and read a personal letter from Hudson, who was too sick to attend. The letter was emotional, full of pain and defiance. Lancaster's delivery was quiet but firm. The room, packed with stars, was silent. The fundraiser pulled in over $1 million, one of the largest single-night donations for AIDS relief at the time. Lancaster's involvement turned heads. He had never spoken publicly about Hudson's private life before, and he didn't now, but reading that letter was a clear statement. He was standing with his friend in front of cameras, in the middle of a cultural firestorm. This wasn't just about friendship. Lancaster had always leaned left politically. He'd marched for civil rights, spoken out against blacklisting, and fought censorship. But this moment was different. AIDS carried stigma. It was costing people their lives and their dignity. Most celebrities stayed quiet. Lancaster chose to act. He didn't join every rally or give interviews about the crisis. That wasn't his style. But that night on stage mattered. It showed loyalty, not just to Hudson, but to everyone who'd been forced into silence. He didn't need applause. He didn't need headlines. He just did the right thing and walked away. Hudson died later that year. Lancaster never commented again. No memoir reflection, no press statement, just that one night, that one letter. In a city built on image, Lancaster had always played the long game. And in that moment, he reminded people that character isn't measured by what you say when it's easy, it's what you do when it's hard. No camera tricks, no spotlight needed, just action, quiet, visible, and unforgettable. Final years. Burt Lancaster's body finally slowed down in 1990. A serious stroke left him partially paralyzed and forced him into retirement. He spent his final years out of the public eye, living with his longtime companion, Susan Martin. They had been together quietly for years and married after his stroke. Lancaster, once so fiercely physical and expressive, now lived in near silence. He died on the 20th of October, 1994, just shy of his 81st birthday. The obituaries called him a legend, a risk-taker, a Hollywood original. He was remembered for From Here to Eternity, Elmer Gantry, and Birdman of Alcatraz. Tributes poured in from actors and directors he had mentored or challenged, or both, but the public image didn't tell the whole story. Decades later, Burt Lancaster's FBI file was declassified. The documents included references to alleged relationships with both men and women, vague notes about suspected conduct, and several redacted pages. Nothing definitive, just enough to remind readers that behind the clean-cut leading man was a figure the government never fully trusted. Kate Buford's 2000 biography, Burt Lancaster: An American Life, addressed the rumors directly. She wrote that Lancaster never confirmed or denied any allegations about his sexuality, not even privately. He wasn't evasive, he was deliberate. Buford suggested that his silence wasn't about shame, it was about protecting people, friends, lovers, maybe both. He never gave interviews explaining himself, he never published a memoir. What he left behind was a career of sharp turns, a trail of broken contracts, and a filmography packed with risk. He went from noir tough guys to political dramas to character studies that no one else would touch, all on his terms. What remains is a complicated legacy. He challenged Hollywood's rules in front of the camera and defied them behind the scenes. He made room for others by refusing to play by the old script. In the end, the mystery stayed intact. And maybe that was the point. Not everything needed to be answered. Some parts of Lancaster's life weren't for the screen. They were his. He protected them. And he took them with him. One thing is certain. Doris Day was a great actress. But she had no luck with true love. After 4 failed marriages and several ups and downs, a part of her went rogue. But first, let's get inside the life of this amazing actress and build up to her crazy intimate life. Who was Doris Day? Doris Day, born Doris Mary Ann Kappelhoff on April 3, 1922, was a force of nature in Hollywood. She was an actress, singer, and icon. She began her career in 1937 as a big band singer. In 1945, she hit it big with 2 massive hits, Sentimental Journey and My Dreams Are Getting Better All the Time. Both were with Les Brown and his band of renown. But after that, she went solo, and over the next 2 decades, she recorded over 650 songs. Yeah, she was that prolific. Now, Doris wasn't just a voice to be reckoned with. She was one of Hollywood's biggest stars in the 50s and 60s. Her film career kicked off with Romance on the High Seas in 1948, and from there, she was everywhere. She could do it all: musicals, comedies, dramas, even thrillers. In 1953, she played the legendary Calamity Jane. In 1956, she acted in Alfred Hitchcock's The Man Who Knew Too Much with James Stewart. But her comedies with Rock Hudson really turned heads, especially Pillow Talk, 1959. Their chemistry was off the charts. It earned Doris an Oscar nomination for Best Actress. She also teamed up with James Garner for two fun flicks in 1963, Move Over Darling and The Thrill of It All, and shared the screen with some of Hollywood's biggest names like Clark Gable, Cary Grant, James Cagney, Frank Sinatra, and Lauren Bacall. After her film career wound down in the late 60s, Doris didn't disappear. Instead, she jumped into TV with The Doris Day Show, 1968-1973, which was a big hit. Doris's legacy was celebrated all throughout her career and beyond. In 1989, she won a Golden Globe and the Cecil B. DeMille Award for Lifetime Achievement in Motion Pictures. In 2004, she got the Presidential Medal of Freedom. In 2008, she added a Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award. She even earned a Legend Award from the Society of Singers. But she wasn't done yet. Doris released her 29th studio album, My Heart, in 2011, which went on to become a top 10 hit in the UK. Not bad for someone who, as of 2020, was one of only 8 artists to be the top box office earner in the US 4 times. Doris Day wasn't just a star, she was an era all on her own. The pain behind the star. Doris Day was a walking contradiction in the eyes of the public. On screen, she was the ultimate girl next door, sunny, charming, and wholesome. Audiences loved her for her comedies and feel-good romances. They always had happy endings. She was an ideal, the perfect partner, friend, and optimist. But in real life, her story couldn't have been more different. Doris's characters found love and happiness with ease. Her own love life was messy, painful, and full of betrayal. It's almost ironic. She could convincingly play someone with it all figured out. But behind the scenes, she was struggling to find the very thing her movies were about: love and stability. She played beloved characters. But in life, those she trusted let her down. Her personal struggles made the contrast even more striking. Her 4 failed marriages and financial betrayals were no fairy tale. They were far from the picture-perfect romances Hollywood sold to her fans. It's easy to wonder if those love stories were bittersweet for her. She was creating a fantasy she could never fully experience. Yet, she never let the public see the pain she carried. Doris was a professional through and through. No matter her personal issues, she showed up with a smile. She was ready to deliver the joy that audiences expected from her. She wasn't just acting in her movies. She was also playing a role in real life, hiding her heartbreak and struggles. This stark contrast between her screen persona and her real-life challenges is a big part of what makes her story so fascinating. It reminds us that even beloved stars have unseen battles. Doris Day's life wasn't the perfect love story her movies made it seem, but her strength and resilience in the face of it all made her story just as compelling. Her imperfect love story. Doris Day's love life was nothing like the fairy tale romances she brought to life on the big screen. It was a mess behind the scenes. While she charmed audiences with her sunny personality and perfect love stories, her real relationships were messy, heartbreaking, and far from the happily ever after she portrayed. Doris was married 4 times, and each one seemed to leave her with more pain than joy. Her first husband, Al Jordan, was a trombone player and, quite frankly, a nightmare of a man. He was abusive, controlling, and insanely jealous. Things got so bad that he reportedly forced her to have an abortion. It was a traumatic experience she carried with her. Their marriage didn't last long, and for good reason. Doris had to get away from his violent temper. It was a horrible chapter in her life that she rarely talked about. Her second marriage to George Weidler wasn't much better. George was a saxophonist, and while he didn't have Al's temper, he had his own issues. George just couldn't handle Doris's rising fame. Instead of supporting her, he felt overshadowed and insecure about her success. He walked away, leaving Doris heartbroken. She wondered if she'd ever find a lasting relationship. Then came Martin Melcher, her third husband. For a while, it seemed he was the stability she had sought. Martin was a movie producer and got heavily involved in managing her career. But after his death, Doris discovered he had secretly left her in a mountain of debt. He'd signed her up for projects without telling her. He mismanaged her money, leaving her to clean up the mess. It was a betrayal that cut deep, especially coming from someone she trusted so completely. Her fourth and final marriage was to Barry Comden, a restaurant owner. He seemed like a down-to-earth guy, but even that relationship didn't go the distance. Barry was much older, and they just couldn't make it work. Doris loved her quiet life and her animals, and Barry wanted something different. It wasn't long before they went their separate ways, leaving Doris single again. The thing is, Doris wanted love and stability more than anything. She didn't seek the spotlight in her personal life. She just wanted someone to be there for her and treat her right. But time and time again, her relationships fell apart, leaving her with more heartbreak than happiness. It's wild to think about the contrast between her real life and her on-screen image. While audiences saw this cheerful, lovable woman who seemed to have it all, behind closed doors, Doris was dealing with betrayal, disappointment, and a lot of pain that most people never saw. The secret affairs. There were always whispers and rumors about secret affairs and flings with some of Hollywood's biggest names. For a star like Doris, who was marketed as America's sweetheart, the idea of her having a steamy off-screen romance was both thrilling and scandalous. But the Hollywood machine was very good at keeping those kinds of stories under wraps, and Doris herself wasn't one to air her private life. So much of it remains speculation. One of the biggest rumors always revolved around her chemistry with her male co-stars. Take Rock Hudson, for instance. Every time they shared the screen, it was pure magic. Their banter was natural, their connection electric. It made people wonder if there was something real between them. Of course, Rock Hudson was keeping his own massive secret as a gay man in a time when that wasn't accepted, so any romantic link between him and Doris was probably more fantasy than fact. Still, their friendship was genuine, and their bond was so strong that it kept fans guessing. Then there's James Garner, another leading man who seemed to have amazing chemistry with Doris. They worked together on the thrill of it all and Move Over, Darling, and the spark between them was undeniable. James himself once said that working with Doris was like working with a close friend. But you can't help but wonder if there was ever a moment where things might have blurred a bit. They were both married at the time, so any deeper connection would have had to stay under wraps if it existed at all. And it wasn't just her co-stars. There were always quiet rumors about influential men in Hollywood being drawn to Doris. She had this natural warmth and charm that made people gravitate toward her. Whether it was a producer, a director, or some studio exec, the idea of Doris having a fling with someone behind the scenes wasn't completely out of the question. But here's the thing. Doris wasn't one to lean on the casting couch to get ahead. She worked hard for her success, and if there were affairs, they were probably more about genuine connection than career moves. The press loved Doris, but they also knew how to protect her image. Back in those days, studios controlled everything. If a juicy story about an affair started to bubble up, the PR team would swoop in and either squash it completely or spin it into something innocent. They had to protect her squeaky clean reputation because it was such a big part of her brand. Doris wasn't the type to stir up drama, and the studio loved her for that. Even if something did happen behind closed doors, it never made it onto the front page. At the end of the day, we may never know the full truth about Doris's rumored lovers. She was fiercely private, and the Hollywood system of her time was built to keep secrets like that buried. But the speculation alone adds another layer of intrigue to her story. Whether those connections were real or just part of the Hollywood rumor mill, they show how magnetic and fascinating Doris Day truly was, both on screen and off. The hand of the studios. Doris Day's career thrived in an era when Hollywood studios had the power to control every aspect of their star's public image, and for Doris, that meant maintaining her reputation as America's wholesome, all-American girl. The studio machine went to extraordinary lengths to ensure that nothing could tarnish her image, even if it meant hiding the messy realities of her personal life. Doris was, after all, a box office powerhouse, and her brand was built on being approachable, lovable, and perfectly innocent. Someone audiences could admire and trust. The studio's involvement in preserving Doris's pristine image was calculated and relentless. During her peak in the 1950s and 1960s, she was portrayed as a symbol of virtuous living, both on and off the screen. Her roles often depicted her as the good girl who resisted temptation, stood up for her principles, and eventually found love in the most wholesome way possible. But life doesn't always imitate art, and Doris's real life didn't align so neatly with the characters she played. The studios knew this and worked overtime to ensure that the public never found out. One example of this calculated image management was the way the studios handled her tumultuous personal life. Doris had 4 marriages, 2 of which were disastrous, particularly her first, to Al Jordan, who was abusive, and her third, to Martin Melcher, who left her in financial ruin. These kinds of stories could have easily sullied her public persona, so the studio's public relations teams stepped in to spin narratives that painted her as resilient and innocent, or they simply buried the uglier details altogether. Press coverage focused on her girl next door qualities, rather than the struggles she endured behind closed doors. Another tactic the studios used was outright suppression. Back in Doris's day, the tabloids and press were far more cooperative with Hollywood than they are today. If rumors of an affair or scandal began to surface, the studios would intervene, offering favors, exclusives, or even outright payments to ensure that negative stories never saw the light of day. For instance, speculation about her chemistry with co-stars like Rock Hudson or James Garner could have easily spun into salacious tabloid fodder, but the PR teams were quick to reframe these as purely professional relationships. In the case of Rock Hudson, whose sexuality was a closely guarded secret at the time, the studio machine went into overdrive to protect both his and Doris's images. Instead of letting rumors spiral, they promoted their friendship and on-screen partnership as a perfect example of platonic camaraderie, keeping anything more suggestive under wraps. Even Doris's financial troubles after Martin Melcher's death were carefully controlled in the media. Instead of letting the public dwell on how Melcher had mismanaged her finances and left her in millions of dollars of debt, the narrative was reframed to focus on Doris's resilience and determination to bounce back. Her lawsuit against her late husband's business associates and her eventual financial recovery became a story of triumph, not betrayal. What's particularly striking about all of this is how it contrasts with today's celebrity culture. In the age of social media, stars often share their lives directly with their fans, warts and all. Scandals, breakups, and even personal struggles are not only acknowledged but sometimes even leveraged for publicity. The transparency and rawness of today's celebrity world would have been unthinkable in Doris Day's time, where every detail was carefully curated to fit a brand. Doris herself was notoriously private, and while some of that was likely her preference, much of it was driven by the Hollywood system's insistence on maintaining control. Ultimately, the Hollywood cover-up wasn't unique to Doris Day, but it was particularly effective in her case because of how much her career relied on her wholesome, untouchable image. The studios were determined to keep her fans believing in the perfect Doris Day they saw on screen, even if the real Doris was dealing with heartbreak, betrayal, and personal struggles behind the scenes. It's a testament to how powerful the Hollywood machine once was, and how much it could conceal, even from the most adoring fans. From the Horse's Mouth, Autobiography. Doris's personal views on intimacy are one of the most fascinating and private aspects of her life. She rarely talked about it openly, but when she did, or when bits and pieces were shared by those close to her, it became clear that her experiences with love and relationships left a deep mark on how she approached trust and connection. From her autobiographies and interviews, you can piece together a sense of how complicated her feelings about intimacy were. Doris wasn't someone who wore her heart on her sleeve, but her words often hinted at a vulnerability she tried to keep hidden. Growing up in a strict, somewhat conservative household, she likely had very traditional ideas about love and relationships instilled in her early on. Yet her life experiences, especially the traumas she endured in her marriages, must have challenged and reshaped those views over time. Her first marriage to Al Jordan was a horrifying introduction to intimacy. Being forced into situations against her will, including an abortion, was deeply scarring. It's hard to imagine how such an abusive relationship didn't leave lasting emotional walls. That kind of betrayal and control can make it incredibly difficult to trust others or feel safe in vulnerability. Doris was just a teenager at the time, barely stepping into adulthood, and those formative years were shaped by fear and manipulation. As she moved on to other relationships, there seemed to be a constant tension between her desire for love and the harsh realities of what she encountered. Doris had a romantic soul, She wanted to believe in the kind of love that her characters often found on screen, but time after time, life threw her curveballs. Husbands like Martin Melcher, who deceived her financially, only reinforced the idea that trust was fragile, and intimacy often came with strings attached or hidden agendas. People close to Doris have said that she had a practical side when it came to relationships. She wasn't one to openly chase passion or whirlwind romances. Instead, she seemed to long for a steady, dependable connection. But society, particularly during her heyday, had certain expectations for women, especially someone with her wholesome image. The public loved to see her as a symbol of purity and light, and that must have been a lot of pressure for someone navigating the messy reality of relationships behind the scenes. Did she ever feel trapped by these expectations? Maybe. She lived in a time when women were often judged harshly for seeking happiness outside of traditional roles, and that might explain why Doris kept so much of her personal life tightly under wraps. There's also speculation about whether Doris sought freedom in her personal life or felt constrained by societal norms. She never seemed like the type to follow a rebellious path, but she did make bold decisions when it came to walking away from relationships that didn't serve her. Leaving Al Jordan and George Weidler took courage, especially at a time when divorce was still somewhat stigmatized. Yet, she didn't exactly push back publicly against the role society expected her to play. She quietly lived her life, making choices that protected her peace without turning it into a public statement. Through it all, Doris Day's relationship with intimacy seems to have been deeply influenced by her early traumas, her longing for real love, and the immense pressure of being one of Hollywood's most adored stars. Whether she ever fully found what she was looking for is something only she could have answered, but one thing is certain: she faced these struggles with grace, strength, and an unshakable will to keep moving forward. After Hollywood. After Doris Day retired from acting, she didn't just fade into the background. Instead, she poured herself into something that truly mattered to her: animal rights. It might surprise some people who only know her as the wholesome, singing, dancing star of the 50s and 60s, but Doris was deeply passionate about animals her entire life. She had a love for animals that was bigger than any role she ever played on screen, and that love became her next big mission. In 1978, she founded the Doris Day Animal Foundation, DDAF, an organization dedicated to protecting animals, supporting rescue operations, and advocating for better laws to safeguard animals from cruelty and neglect. She was more than just a figurehead. Doris was hands-on in her work. She was deeply involved in the foundation's efforts, working tirelessly behind the scenes, even though her Hollywood days were behind her. The DDAF continues its mission today, focusing on initiatives like rescuing animals in need, promoting responsible pet ownership, and raising awareness about the importance of animal welfare. Her foundation was her life's work after the cameras stopped rolling. Doris didn't just talk the talk when it came to animals, she walked the walk. Her personal life was full of rescues, and she had many pets over the years, including dogs, cats, and even a few horses. She was a strong advocate for adopting animals from shelters rather than buying them from breeders, and she used her platform to encourage others to do the same. She even campaigned for better living conditions for animals in zoos and circuses, areas that were often poorly regulated back then. Her passion for animals wasn't just about keeping them out of harm's way, it was also about giving them the best life possible. Doris's commitment to improving the lives of animals in shelters, advocating for animal-friendly laws, and even funding rescue organizations showed that she cared deeply about the well-being of every living creature. In fact, she once said, "I just want to help animals and be their voice." And she meant it. She also didn't shy away from using her fame to further the cause. Whether through interviews, public appearances, or her work with the DDAF, Doris brought much-needed attention to animal issues. In an era when most stars were focused on their careers or public personas, Doris was quietly making a difference. And it wasn't just a passing interest. This was something that stayed with her for the rest of her life. Her dedication to animal welfare also led to her receiving a ton of accolades and awards, including the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 2004, which highlighted her work with animals and the impact she made off-screen. In the years leading up to her death in 2019, Doris was still an active supporter of animal rights, continuing her advocacy and working through the foundation to help as many animals as possible. From the tragic accident that almost crippled her to being turned into a punching bag by her husband while pregnant, Doris Day has no doubt gone through hell. But on TV screens, she was the perfect girl next door. Little did most of her fans know what was truly going on behind closed doors. We'll get to that. In case you don't know who Doris Day was, you're in for a treat. Doris Day, an icon. Born Doris Mary Ann Kappelhoff on April 3, 1922, she was an American actress and singer who took the industry by storm. Her journey began back in 1939 when she kicked off her career as a big band singer. Fast forward to 1945 and she hit it big with not just one but two chart-topping songs, Sentimental Journey and My Dreams Are Getting Better All the Time, thanks to her collaboration with Les Brown and his band of renown. But Doris wasn't just about the band life, she was ready to fly solo. She ditched Brown and embarked on a solo career that saw her record over 650 songs from 1947 to 1967. Talk about a powerhouse. In the 1950s and 1960s, Doris was one of the leading ladies of Hollywood. Her film career took off with the 1948 flick Romance on the High Seas, and from there she starred in a little bit of everything. Musicals, comedies, dramas, and even thrillers. Remember her as Calamity Jane in Calamity Jane, 1953? Or maybe you caught her in Alfred Hitchcock's The Man Who Knew Too Much, 1956, alongside James Stewart. She had some unforgettable on-screen chemistry with Rock Hudson, co-starring in 3 successful comedies, including the classic Pillow Talk, 1959, which even earned her an Academy Award nomination for Best Actress. And let's not forget her appearances with the likes of Clark Gable, Cary Grant, James Cagney, and Frank Sinatra. She truly shared the screen with some of the biggest names in Hollywood. But she didn't just stop at movies. After hanging up her film boots in 1968, just as her star was shining at its brightest, she launched into television with The Doris Day Show, which ran from 1968 to 1973. Doris's talent didn't go unnoticed. She snagged a Golden Globe and the Cecil B. DeMille Award for Lifetime Achievement in Motion Pictures in 1989. Then, in 2004, she received the Presidential Medal of Freedom. No big deal, right? And if that wasn't enough, she also grabbed the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award in 2008 and a Legend Award from the Society of Singers. In 2011, she scored the Los Angeles Film Critics Association's Career Achievement Award, proving she was still in the game. Just when you thought she'd slow down, Doris released her 29th studio album, My Heart, in 2011, which was packed with new material and even hit the UK top 10. By 2020, she was one of only 8 recording artists to have topped the box office in the US 4 times. But now, to the not-so-glamorous parts you may not have known. The accident. On October 14, 1937, Doris Kappelhoff, then a bright-eyed 16-year-old dancer from Cincinnati, found herself in a starkly different world as she lay in a hospital bed at Mercy Hospital. Just hours before, she had been filled with dreams of a dazzling Hollywood future, preparing to take the leap into stardom. That dream now lay in shambles around her, shattered by a terrible car accident that had altered the course of her life. The night before the accident was supposed to be a celebration. Doris, along with her dance partner Jerry Dougherty, had just signed a 5-year contract with an organization that supplied dancers to the movie industry in Hollywood. They were ready to embark on a new adventure, leaving behind the familiar stages of the Netherland Plaza Hotel and the Cincinnati Club, where they had performed countless times. Friends had gathered for a farewell party at the home of Mr. Clarence Holden, offering well wishes and sending them off with dreams of success. Doris and Jerry felt unstoppable, fueled by the excitement of what lay ahead. But as fate would have it, the ride home from the party took a tragic turn. Doris, Jerry, and 2 other friends, Albert Schroeder and Marion Bonekamp, were in the car when it collided with a freight train at 5th and High Streets. The impact was catastrophic. In an instant, The bright future Doris had envisioned was turned upside down. After the crash, Doris was left lying on the parkway, surrounded by debris, her leg injured, and her dreams feeling distant. As paramedics arrived, the reality of her situation set in. "My leg is broken. My leg is broken," she cried out, her voice filled with fear and desperation as she was loaded into the ambulance. She pleaded for her mother, Alma Kappelhoff, who had planned to accompany her to Hollywood, knowing how much this meant to her daughter. In the chaos, Jerry rushed to her side, his concern palpable as he tried to assess the situation. When he realized the extent of her injuries, it broke his heart. For nearly 6 years, they had danced together, preparing for this moment, and now it felt as if everything had come crashing down. Despite the pain and fear, Doris tried to comfort him, assuring him that she would dance again. After the accident, the hospital staff examined Doris's injuries. They confirmed that she had suffered a broken leg, which would require at least 4 months of recovery. The news was a heavy blow to Doris, who had spent countless hours training in ballet and voice, preparing for her moment in the spotlight. She couldn't help but think of how close she was to achieving her dreams, only to be sidelined by this terrible accident. Doris's mother remained by her side, trying to keep her spirits up. She reminded Doris that they would have to wait until spring for their trip to Hollywood, a statement that felt like salt in the wound. Meanwhile, the other passengers, Albert and Marion, sustained various cuts and bruises but were otherwise okay, which was a small comfort in the aftermath of the crash. As days turned into weeks in the hospital, Doris grappled with her injury and the toll it took on her aspirations. While she was stuck in bed, her dreams of dancing faded like the sunlight outside her window. However, instead of letting despair consume her, Doris began to channel her energy into singing. She recognized that while her dancing career was on hold, her voice could still carry her to new heights. During her recovery, she immersed herself in vocal training, honing her talent and finding solace in music. This decision would ultimately set the stage for a remarkable transformation in her career. Just a few months later, bandleader Les Brown heard Doris's voice and recognized her extraordinary talent. He offered her a chance to sing with his band, which opened the door to her first major hit, Sentimental Journey. From that point on, Doris Day became a household name, charming audiences with her voice and her infectious smile, all the while carrying the lessons learned from that harrowing night. The accident may have altered her path, but it didn't define her. Instead, it shaped her into the iconic figure she would become, showing the world that the show must go on, no matter the obstacles. She was a fake girl next door. Doris Day was the epitome of the girl next door in Hollywood, a bright, cheerful figure who seemed to embody innocence and charm. But let's be real, that persona was a carefully crafted image, a product of what studio executives and publicists wanted to sell to the American public. Behind all that sunshine and sweetness, Doris's life was filled with struggles that didn't quite fit the wholesome package she was expected to deliver. When Doris first hit the scene in the late 1940s, she was marketed like a dream. Films like Romance on the High Seas and Pillow Talk showcased her as the perfect, lovable heroine who always ended up with the guy. And why wouldn't they want to promote that? After World War II, people were craving stories that reaffirmed traditional values, and Doris was just the gal for the job. But here's where it gets interesting. While she was playing these roles, her real life was anything but picture perfect. Even as her career took off, Doris often found herself forced into roles that didn't resonate with her true self. After her split from Jordan, she wanted to branch out and try more serious parts, but Hollywood wasn't having it. Instead, they pushed her back into those light-hearted romantic comedies, reinforcing that sweet girl image. It was like a never-ending cycle of play the part, don't rock the boat. As the years went by, Doris started to feel suffocated by the very persona that had made her a star. By the 1960s, she was a household name, but it came with a hefty price tag of public expectations. People wanted her to keep smiling, keep being that innocent, carefree woman, even as her personal life began to unravel. From marriage problems to substance abuse, the real Doris Day was a far cry from what you saw on TV, and the executives knew this and hid this from the world. She was a punching bag. Doris Day was the golden girl of Hollywood. She was often portrayed as a bubbly, cheerful persona that made her an endearing figure on screen. But behind that sunny exterior was a darker reality, one marked by a series of awful and abusive relationships that would leave deep emotional scars. Doris's first marriage to Al Jordan, a big band musician, began with a whirlwind romance that quickly devolved into a nightmare. They married in 1946, and Doris was excited about starting a family. However, as time went on, the shadows of their relationship grew longer. Al, who struggled with his own demons, reportedly became physically violent towards Doris. This was not just limited to emotional manipulation. He was known to have hit her even while she was pregnant with their son Terry. Imagine the fear and helplessness Doris must have felt, carrying a child while facing such violence from someone she had trusted and loved. The abuse took a significant toll on Doris. It was not merely a series of physical assaults. It was an all-encompassing emotional struggle. Doris had to endure feeling trapped in a marriage where love was replaced by fear. But there was also her career to think of. The pressure to maintain her public image as America's sweetheart compounded her pain. After all, how could someone so beloved be experiencing such turmoil? This facade became an overwhelming burden, forcing her to conceal her struggles while putting on a brave face for the world. But soon enough, even Doris took a stand and said, "Enough is enough." The tipping point came when Doris realized she could no longer endure the abuse. Summoning every ounce of strength, she left Al, taking their son with her. Leaving was a significant and courageous step, but it was also the beginning of a long healing process. Doris had to confront the trauma of her past while also working hard to provide for her son. The emotional scars from the abuse lingered long after she escaped the situation. It would take years of self-discovery, therapy, and self-reflection for her to reclaim her sense of self-worth. The impact of her first marriage didn't just fade away with time. Doris often spoke about how the violence she experienced shaped her views on relationships and love. Even as she found success in her career, the shadow of her past continued to follow her. For years, she struggled with trust and intimacy, fearing that any new relationship might mirror her experiences with Al. But at another attempt at love, Doris faced an equally worse fate: sleeping with the enemy. When Doris married Martin in 1951, she believed she had found a partner who would support and love her unconditionally. Martin was not just her husband. He was also her manager, guiding her career and helping her navigate Hollywood. For many years, it seemed like they were a perfect match. Doris trusted him completely, letting him take the reins on her finances and career decisions. She was focused on her work, pouring herself into singing, acting, and making films. Meanwhile, Martin was handling the business side of things, or so she thought. However, as it turned out, Martin had a darker side that Doris never fully grasped. While she was busy being America's sweetheart, he was allegedly squandering her fortune, which was estimated to be around $20 million at the time. Imagine putting your trust in someone so deeply, only to find out later that they were secretly draining your bank account. It was a betrayal of the highest order. And when Doris learned the truth after Martin's demise in 1968, it felt like the ground had been ripped out from under her. After Martin passed away, Doris began to dig into their finances, and what she uncovered was nothing short of shocking. Not only had Martin mismanaged her money, but he had also kept her completely in the dark about their financial ruin. There were no warnings, no discussions about budgeting, or even any hints that they were in dire straits. Instead, Doris found herself facing the harsh reality of almost being bankrupt. The man she had trusted most had not only betrayed her financially but also emotionally, leaving her feeling lost and alone. To add insult to injury, Martin had taken it a step further by secretly signing her up for a television series, The Doris Day Show, without her knowledge or consent. He knew that this would be a major project for her, but rather than discussing it with her, he just went ahead and made the decision on his own. Her own husband had run you into the ground financially, but he also made major career moves without consulting her. It must have been infuriating for Doris, who had built her career through hard work and determination. Eventually, Doris had to pick up the pieces of her shattered financial situation, and it wasn't easy. She found herself navigating bankruptcy and financial recovery at a time when she was also grappling with the emotional fallout from Martin's betrayal. It was a real wake-up call for her, forcing her to take control of her life in a way she never had to before. She had always relied on Martin to handle the business side, but now she needed to become her own advocate and financial manager. Despite the challenges, Doris faced this new chapter with resilience. She stepped into her role on The Doris Day Show, using it as an opportunity to rebuild her career and regain her financial footing. This series became a significant part of her life, allowing her to showcase her talent to a new generation while also helping to restore her wealth. Slowly but surely, she began to claw her way back from the brink of financial disaster. Looking back, Doris often reflected on her experiences with Martin. She learned the hard way that trust, while essential in relationships, should also be accompanied by awareness and oversight. It was a painful lesson, but it ultimately shaped her into a stronger and more independent woman. She would go on to advocate for animal rights and focus on her passions, turning the page on a tumultuous chapter in her life. She was lonely. Doris Day's life really shows that fame doesn't always come with happiness. Sure, she was the charming girl next door that everyone loved, lighting up the screen and belting out catchy tunes. But behind that bright smile, she often felt more alone than you'd think. It's a real twist, because the more popular she got, the more isolated she felt. Imagine being adored by millions but still feeling lonely at night. As Doris's star began to shine in the 50s and 60s, the pressure to maintain that perfect image only grew. People saw her as this bubbly, carefree icon, but underneath she was battling feelings of isolation. While other celebs might have thrived at glamorous parties, Doris longed for something deeper, real connections with people who got her, not just her public persona. She was in this weird position where everyone loved her, but the fame made it hard to find genuine friendships. The conversations she had often felt like they were skimming the surface, and she craved those heart-to-heart talks that could really make you feel connected. The glitzy world of Hollywood sometimes felt more like a bubble that kept her from forming true bonds. Plus, being under the media's microscope didn't help. Every little thing she did was scrutinized, and her personal life became the topic of gossip. It's like she was on a stage, but the audience only saw a performance, not the person behind the curtain. The very fame that brought her adoration also made it difficult for her to share her real self. She wanted to connect with others, but she was always worried about how people would judge her. Her romantic life added to that loneliness. Her first marriage to Al Jordan was pretty rocky, and her third husband, Martin Melcher, turned out to be a huge disappointment when it came to trusting him with her finances. Those experiences left her feeling scarred and hesitant to open up to new people. She really wanted companionship, but her past made it hard for her to trust anyone. In her quieter moments, Doris reflected on her life and couldn't shake off the sadness. She'd often say that, even with all her success, she felt a void inside. Sure, she had the fame, the fan mail, and the accolades, but none of that could replace the comfort of true companionship. At times, she just wanted someone to share her life with, someone real to lean on in a world that felt so fake. But sadly, she never had that. So she poured herself into her music and acting, maybe hoping that by sharing her feelings, she could connect with others on a deeper level. Songs like Que Sera Sera really hit home, not just for her fans, but for her too. Through her performances, she sought to bridge the gap between the dazzling Doris everyone saw and the lonely woman she felt like inside. The tragic demise. Doris Day's life took a heartbreaking turn when her son, Terry Melcher, passed away. Terry was born in 1942 during her tumultuous first marriage to Al Jordan. As a child, he was surrounded by all Hollywood had to offer, and Doris was fiercely protective of him. She worked hard to give him a stable upbringing, especially considering the chaos she faced in her own life. Terry grew up to become a talented music producer and songwriter, working with some of the biggest names in the industry, like the Byrds and Paul McCartney. He had his own share of success and seemed to be carving out a unique identity in the music world, separate from his mother's enormous shadow. Doris was incredibly proud of him and often spoke about how talented he was, which must have brought her immense joy given the struggles she faced in her relationships. However, the dark clouds of tragedy loomed over their family. In 2004, Terry was diagnosed with skin cancer, and Doris watched helplessly as her beloved son battled the disease. It was a devastating blow for her, as she had already endured so much heartache throughout her life, including abusive relationships and the pressure of fame. Terry fought hard, but the cancer took its toll, and he passed away in November 2004 at the age of 62. The loss of her son was like a devastating earthquake in Doris's life, shaking her to the core. She was deeply affected by his passing, feeling an emptiness that words could hardly describe. Doris often reflected on her relationship with Terry, emphasizing how close they were and how they leaned on each other throughout their lives. After losing him, she poured her grief into her work and her love for animals, dedicating her energy to animal rights activism. It was as if she sought to channel her pain into something positive, honoring Terry's memory by continuing to make the world a better place.
When you see them on screen with their amazing talent and skill alongside their aura in interviews, it is not far-fetched why a lot of the actors from the golden age of Hollywood are admired and almost worshipped. But we aren't just going to go behind the scenes, we are going even further into the bedrooms of these stars to see the twisted desires that they enjoyed. Some of them would leave you in awe. Hair taste. Rudolph Valentino, the smoldering heartthrob of the silent screen, the guy who made hearts race and knees weak with just a smolder. Hidden beneath his incredible talent and good looks lies a secret he tried to hide from the rest of the world, a fascination with hair. Yes, you heard right. The man with the brooding eyes and the suave demeanor reportedly had a thing for locks of hair, like collecting them from his lovers or people he was intimate with. It was said that during the deed, he would grab onto his lover's lock of hair and pull, almost like he wanted to yank it off, and after they're done, he would cut a piece of their hair and keep it for himself. It was a ritual that turned him. Some say he wanted to create a wild scrapbook, something to remember them by. They say he would sniff and even rub the locks of hair around his groin when no one was looking. However, it should be noted that the veracity of this claim is based on hearsay and rumors, but on the other hand, some of the people who have spoken up about this claim to be his past lovers. So was Rudolph Valentino really the Casanova with a hair interest? Or was it just another spicy detail Hollywood cooked up to keep us all on the edge of our seats? The truth might be lost in the drama of the silver screen, but one thing's for sure, it adds a whole new meaning to the phrase love locks, doesn't it? Golden showers, Erich von Stroheim. This was a man who wore many hats, filmmaker, actor, and apparently a guy with a rumored penchant for golden showers. And no, it's not rain we're talking about here. So here's the scoop. Along the corridors of vintage Hollywood, there are whispers about Stroheim and his supposed fondness for a unique form of intimacy involving liquid gold, which is slang or pee or urine. Erich von Stroheim, with his director's eye and actor's charisma, had a reputation that went beyond his cinematic achievements. The rumor mill suggested he had a thing for, well, unconventional waterworks in the bedroom. Exhibitionism inclination, Marilyn Monroe. Legend has it that Marilyn wasn't at all shy about embracing her sensuality, even in less conventional settings. Rumors swirled about her enjoying the thrill of being watched, adding an extra layer of spice to her already iconic image. The Hollywood siren loved basking in the glow of a spotlight, not just on the screen, but also in the bedroom. She was rumored to have multiple intimate partners, sometimes at the same time, and she would make them watch as she danced naked or got intimate with another. The claims about Marilyn's exhibitionist tendencies are born from red-hot gossip that is still tantalizing till today. Some say she reveled in the attention, making every moment a stage for her allure. But the evidence supporting these tales isn't exactly a concrete foundation, but somehow the uncertainty of this pleasure adds an extra allure to the amazing legacy of Marilyn Monroe. Uniform fetish Cary Grant Cary Grant and his rumored attraction for uniforms, police uniforms to be precise. It is hard to see the dashing leading man, the epitome of suave sophistication, harboring a penchant for not just anyone, but specifically men in uniform. With his debonair charm and impeccable style, had a thing for the authoritative allure of police uniforms. Cary Grant, the silver screen icon enjoying the allure of a uniform, might add a layer of complexity to his public image. The thought of him finding excitement in the structured attire of law enforcement personnel adds a spicy dimension to his off-screen persona. This inclination may have stemmed from the fact that Grant was attracted to authority and power. Uniforms, especially those associated with authority figures, often symbolize power, control, and discipline. Speculating on where this alleged attraction came from is like piecing together a Hollywood mystery. Some say it's rooted in the desire for a sense of control or perhaps a fascination with the mystique surrounding those who enforce the law. But here's the kicker. The origins of fetishes are often as unique as the individuals who harbor them, and we might never know the full story. As for those who possibly spoke about Grant's uniform attraction, the list is as elusive as a Hollywood secret. Rumors circulate, mentioning unnamed insiders or confidential sources, but concrete evidence is scant. Sadomasochism preference, Ava Gardner. Ava Gardner, the epitome of old Hollywood glamour, navigates the world of Hollywood with a rumored taste for the edgy and intense. Sadomasochism, with its blend of pleasure and pain, is like a bold stroke in the portrait of Ava's rumored private life. The idea that the woman known for her beauty and allure might have dabbled in the darker corners of desire adds a layer of complexity to her iconic image. It is said that she enjoyed anything that caused her pain in the bedroom, and she also got even more turned on by causing her lovers pain. Now, the authenticity of these claims is about as clear as a Hollywood fog. The carriers of Hollywood whispered, insiders hinted, but concrete evidence is elusive. Hollywood is a town where gossip is as common as red carpets, and separating fact from fiction can be as tricky as navigating a film noir plot. Speculating on where this rumored interest might have stemmed from opens a door to the enigma of Ava Gardner. Perhaps it was a desire for an unconventional thrill, a rebellion against the constraints of societal expectations, or maybe just a facet of her complex, personality-seeking expression in a world that often demanded conformity. As for those who might have spoken about Ava's alleged interest in sadomasochism, names fade into the shadows. Hollywood's whispers often lack clear sources, leaving us with tantalizing tales without a definitive storyteller. It's as if the rumor mill decided to keep this particular chapter in Ava's life shrouded in mystery. Nylon stockings fetish, James Dean and the rumored nylon stockings interest that adds a touch of kink to the rebel without a cause. Picture the brooding Hollywood icon, the embodiment of cool, with a rumored penchant for nylon stockings. It's like a scene straight out of a film noir with a provocative twist. Now, let's be crystal clear about this inclination. Nylon stockings, those sheer and silky leg adornments, took center stage in the whispers surrounding James Dean. The thought of the iconic rebel finding allure in the soft caress of nylon adds an unexpected layer to his legendary persona. However, before we dive too deep into this Hollywood tale, a word of caution. These claims lack the solid ground of concrete evidence. It's more like a smoky haze of rumors floating through the decades, leaving us to decipher whether it's a splash of truth or just the allure of a scandalous narrative. So why nylon stockings? That's the million-dollar question. Perhaps it was the texture, the sensuality of the material, or maybe it spoke to Dean's rebellious spirit, choosing something unconventional in a world that often thrived on conformity. The origins of fetishes are as elusive as the characters who harbor them, and in the case of James Dean, we might never know the full story. As for those who may have whispered about Dean's alleged nylon stockings interest, their names fade into the background. Hollywood's tales often lack clear narrators, leaving us with provocative rumors without a definitive storyteller. in the shadowy corridors of James Dean's rumored desires, we're left with a tantalizing question. Did the rebel of the silver screen truly have a thing for nylon stockings, or are these whispers just a part of the mystique that shrouds his legacy?
When you watch a film, what do you see? The story, the plot, the actors and actresses. All of these come together to create the perfect film. But you probably missed some things in your favorite films. They create a beautiful viewing experience. The list goes on, but did you miss these little details? The horse from The Wizard of Oz. One of the coolest hidden details in the movie is something you may have missed. Remember when Dorothy and her friends arrive in Emerald City? They ride in a carriage pulled by a horse that magically changes colors, and you see it go from purple to red to yellow, and it's such a fun little moment that adds to the whimsical vibe of Oz. But here's the thing, this was all done practically, no CGI obviously because it's 1939. The filmmakers used white horses and applied vegetable-based dyes to their coats to create the effect. They picked vegetable dye because it was safe for the animals and easy to wash off. They had to shoot those scenes quickly, though, because the horses kept licking the dye off themselves. Imagine the crew scrambling between takes to make sure the horse still looked camera-ready. It's such a clever and subtle touch that makes the magic of Oz feel real, even though it's a simple old-school trick. Next time you watch, pay attention to the transitions. It's seamless and still holds up as a great piece of movie magic. The snow globe from Citizen Kane. In Citizen Kane, the snow globe in Kane's hand during his final moments isn't just a cool prop, it's a hidden clue to what's really going on with him. Here's the deal. As Kane whispers "Rosebud" and dies, we see the snow globe fall and shatter. But if you look closely, the snow globe's reflection shows his childhood home. It was the house he lived in before being sent away to a life of wealth and isolation. It's a quiet but powerful detail. That snow globe ties everything together. His last word, "Rosebud," is the sled he played with as a kid. The snowy scene inside the globe represents the happy, simple life he lost. The fact that this reflection is there, but not immediately obvious, is what makes it so brilliant. It's one of those blink-and-you-miss-it moments, but it's packed with meaning. Kane's entire life was about trying to fill the emptiness from losing that childhood happiness. And this little snow globe is the perfect symbol of it. It's subtle, clever, and such a genius touch by Orson Welles. The tears in Casablanca. One of the most emotional scenes in Casablanca is when the patrons of Rick's Cafe sing La Marseillaise to drown out the Germans. It's powerful enough on its own, but here's the hidden layer. Many of the extras in that scene were actual refugees who had fled Nazi-occupied Europe. When the actors started singing, it wasn't just acting. For those refugees, the French national anthem was deeply personal, a defiant symbol of freedom and resistance against the Nazis. Their tears and the raw emotion you see on their faces are 100% real. This backstory makes the scene hit even harder. It's not just a stirring moment in the film. It's a genuine expression of grief, hope, and defiance from people who had lived through the horrors of war. Knowing that makes the scene all the more unforgettable. Number 13 from Shadow of a Doubt. In Shadow of a Doubt, Alfred Hitchcock does a brilliant job of using subtle motifs to hint at the dark side of Uncle Charlie. One of the most interesting is his use of the number 13, which pops up multiple times in the film as a quiet but consistent symbol of danger and doom. For example, Uncle Charlie lives in a house with 13 steps leading up to it. Then there's a scene where he's watching a train station clock that's stuck at 13 minutes past the hour. And let's not forget the scene where Charlie, his niece, finds a note with a 13 written on it, hinting at something ominous in the works. It's not obvious, but Hitchcock uses the number 13 to foreshadow Uncle Charlie's sinister nature. It hints that something bad is coming without saying it outright. The number 13 traditionally has a negative, unlucky association, and Hitchcock plays with that cultural symbolism to subtly remind us that Uncle Charlie is not the lovable, charming man he appears to be. It's a perfect example of Hitchcock's genius at building tension with tiny, almost invisible details. The pool from Sunset Boulevard. The detail of Norma Desmond's pool being shaped like a coffin is a chilling piece of visual storytelling that foreshadows the film's opening murder in a very subtle, almost subconscious way. At first glance, the pool just seems like another luxurious, decadent feature of her mansion. But it looks like a coffin. That's eerie given the film's dark themes of death, decay, and obsolescence. Norma Desmond is a once-famous silent film star clinging desperately to the past, and the pool's design reflects that obsession with both death and the idea of being trapped in a bygone era. This visual metaphor also ties into her character's fate. Throughout the film, Norma is portrayed as someone who is slowly losing touch with reality, and by the time of the murder, she has completely snapped. The coffin-shaped pool acts as a visual hint that death, both literal and metaphorical, is looming over her. It's a clever, subtle foreshadowing. It reminds the audience that Norma's life and the film are heading to a tragic end. Ghostly shadow in the third leg. In The Third Man, 1949, one of the most genius moments of suspense happens before we even see Harry Lime, played by Orson Welles. Early in the film, the protagonist Holly Martins walks down a dark alley. Harry's shadow makes a ghostly appearance on the wall before he is revealed. This moment is brilliant for a few reasons. First, it sets up Harry Lime as a mysterious figure long before we meet him face to face. The shadow feels like a looming presence, suggesting that Lime is everywhere and nowhere at the same time. It's as if he's haunting the film from the very start, and the tension builds as we wonder who this elusive figure is. The shadows in this scene fit the film's noir style. In Noir, light and darkness represent the character's moral ambiguity. Harry Lime, as we later discover, is morally murky, a charming yet unscrupulous man. So his shadow isn't just a visual effect, it's a metaphor for his presence in the film and his impact on those around him. It's a subtle but incredibly effective way of introducing a character that remains shrouded in mystery until the big reveal. Champagne bottle in Notorious. In Notorious, 1946, Alfred Hitchcock uses a simple yet brilliant prop, the champagne bottle, as a ticking time bomb in one of the film's most suspenseful scenes. This moment is a perfect example of Hitchcock's ability to turn everyday objects into symbols of tension and danger. At a party, Alicia, Ingrid Bergman, must retrieve a hidden key from a champagne bottle. It's a setup for a larger espionage plot. Devlin, Cary Grant, is there too. The bottle itself isn't just a prop, it's a metaphor for the time bomb ticking down. You see, the moment Alicia touches that bottle, the stakes are raised. The audience knows something dangerous is coming. The champagne bottle becomes a symbol of suspense. Every clink of the glass, every slow motion of it being passed around, feels like the ticking of a bomb. Mysterious Rebecca in Rebecca. One of the most unsettling aspects of the film is the never-seen face of Rebecca herself. Though she's dead before the story even begins, her presence is felt throughout the entire film, looming over everything and everyone, especially the new Mrs. De Winter, Joan Fontaine. The fact that we never actually see Rebecca, her face, her voice, nothing, makes her influence even more oppressive. Hitchcock uses this absence to create an eerie and psychological tension. Rebecca's memory is so powerful that it's almost as if she's a character in her own right, dominating the lives of the people around her. The housekeeper, Mrs. Danvers, is obsessed with Rebecca, constantly comparing the new Mrs. De Winter to her and making her feel inferior. Rebecca's personal items, like her clothes and even her monogrammed things, are still in the house, adding to the feeling that she's never really gone. Her shadow casts over everything, making the new wife feel like a mere placeholder in Rebecca's life and marriage. The mystery in the big sleep. One of the standout features is the deliberately unreadable murder mystery that keeps viewers on their toes. The film, based on a novel by Raymond Chandler, throws a bunch of plot twists, shady characters, and unsolved questions at the audience. It leaves some clues unresolved on purpose. This ambiguity isn't a mistake. It's a hallmark of film noir. In that genre, moral clarity is often blurred. The line between good and bad is unclear. The film presents a web of linked crimes, a missing sister, blackmail, and murders. By the end, some details remain unresolved. The audience never really gets to know all the facts behind the murders, or even the true motivations of some characters. The mystery feels almost like a puzzle that can't fully be solved, leaving a lingering sense of confusion and uncertainty. The Anklet from Double Indemnity. In Double Indemnity, 1944, Barbara Stanwyck's anklet is one of the most subtle but powerfully suggestive details that perfectly encapsulates her character, Phyllis Dietrichson. At first glance, the anklet seems like a small, almost frivolous piece of jewelry, but in the context of the film, it becomes a symbol of Phyllis's allure and the danger she embodies. The anklet first appears when Phyllis is introduced to Walter Neff, played by Fred MacMurray, and it immediately draws attention, just like Phyllis herself. It's a small detail, but its significance grows as the film progresses. The anklet is delicate and feminine, but it also has a hint of sexual allure. Phyllis uses her charm and beauty to manipulate the men around her, and the anklet, like her entire persona, lures Walter into her web of deceit and crime. But beyond its sexual allure, the anklet also carries an underlying sense of danger. In classic noir fashion, nothing is ever as simple as it seems. The Falcon reveal in The Maltese Falcon. The reveal of the Falcon as a fake is one of the most brilliant and subtle commentaries on greed in the entire film. Throughout the movie, the Falcon is the object of obsession, the coveted treasure that everyone is desperate to possess. It represents the ultimate prize, the pinnacle of wealth and power, driving the characters to deceit, betrayal, and murder. But in the end, the Falcon is a worthless replica. It undermines all the violence, lies, and manipulation surrounding it. Background sound in Singin' in the Rain. In this film, Lena Lamont's first talkie scene has clever details. They reveal the struggles of early sound film production. Lena's voice is grating and unbearable. That's a big problem. Her character is a leading lady, but her voice doesn't match her glamorous image. However, if you listen closely to the background sounds in that scene, you can hear something interesting. A lot of mechanical noise, like the sound of the recording equipment. This subtle sound cue reveals that the problem isn't just Lena's voice, it's the equipment. The microphone and sound technology of the time are clearly struggling to capture her voice properly, emphasizing that it's not necessarily the actors who are at fault, but the limitations of the technology itself. Overlapping dialogue in His Girl Friday. One of the most innovative techniques that set the film apart was its use of overlapping dialogue. This was a revolutionary choice. It broke from the slow, traditional dialogue common in films of that era. The overlapping dialogue, where characters talk over each other and interrupt one another frequently, created a more natural, fast-paced tone that mimicked real-life conversations. In most films of the time, dialogue was delivered in a more structured way, with clear pauses between characters' lines. But in His Girl Friday, director Howard Hawks embraced the chaotic, rapid-fire exchanges that happen in actual conversations, especially in the hectic world of the newsroom where the film is set. This choice not only added a sense of realism, but also helped to establish the breakneck speed of the story. The characters are always on the move, always talking, and always trying to stay one step ahead. The dance sequence in The Red Shoes. In The Red Shoes, 1948, a memorable moment is the dance sequence. It blends reality and fantasy so well that it feels like the film's world is dancing with the lead character, Vicky Page. This sequence, which takes place during a performance of the ballet The Red Shoes, is not just a visually stunning moment, it's a profound commentary on the consuming power of art. The sequence starts in a very grounded, realistic way, showing Vicky in rehearsal and on stage, but as the dance progresses, the lines between the performance and her real life begin to blur. The dust in The Treasure of the Sierra Madre. The final scene in this movie is one of the most powerful moments in cinema, and the blowing dust serves as a symbolic reflection of the fleeting nature of wealth and ambition. Throughout the film, Gold is the driving force behind the character's actions, and it promises riches and success. But by the end, the film reveals the devastating truth. Wealth, when pursued blindly, is ephemeral and ultimately destructive. In the final scene, as the treasure hunters, Dobbs, Curtin, and Howard, realize that the gold they fought so hard for is lost in the mountains, the wind begins to blow dust across the barren desert. This dust is symbolic on multiple levels. On one hand, it represents the insignificance of their efforts in the grand scheme of things. The treasure they risked everything for is now lost, and nature itself seems to sweep it away, showing how fleeting and fragile human desires and ambitions can be. The portrait in Laura. The portrait of the title character, Laura Hunt, is a central object in the film that embodies the mystery and allure surrounding her. What makes this portrait even more intriguing is that it wasn't a traditional painting. It was actually a photograph that had been touched up with paint. This choice adds an ethereal, almost dreamlike quality to Laura's image, enhancing the sense of mystery that shrouds her character throughout the film. The striptease in Gilda. Rita Hayworth's iconic glove striptease is one of the most memorable moments in classic film, but what makes it truly fascinating is how it subverts expectations. At first glance, the scene seems like a typical seductive moment designed to dazzle and titillate. After all, Hayworth, playing the titular character Gilda, is an alluring femme fatale, and the act of slowly removing her gloves could easily be read as a moment of sexual power. However, what's often overlooked is how the scene is actually more about vulnerability than seduction. Gilda's movements, though outwardly seductive, are imbued with a deeper sense of emotional exposure. The knuckle tattoos in The Night of the Hunter. Robert Mitchum's character, Reverend Harry Powell, is one of the most chilling villains in cinema history, and his love and hate tattoos on his knuckles are a perfect example of how subtle details can serve as a powerful moral allegory. These tattoos are not just simple markings. They symbolize the core struggle between good and evil that runs through the entire film. Each tattoo is prominently displayed during the numerous fistfights and confrontational moments that Powell has with other characters. As he raises his fist to strike, the words love and hate are in clear view, making them almost seem like a visual representation of his internal battle. Shadows and light in a streetcar named Desire. The use of shadow and light is a key visual tool that director Elia Kazan uses to reflect Blanche Dubois' fragile mental state. One of the most striking examples of this is the recurring motif of the paper lantern, which Blanche uses to cover a harsh light bulb in her room. This simple object becomes a powerful symbol throughout the film, representing Blanche's desire to conceal the painful realities of her past and present. Blanche is a character defined by her inability to face the truth about herself. She has fled her past in the South, carrying with her the trauma of a failed marriage, the loss of her family home, and a history of personal degradation. The harsh light, which symbolizes truth, reality, and the harshness of her circumstances, is something Blanche cannot bear. The paper lantern acts as her attempt to soften or hide these truths, creating a dim, flattering light that distorts her surroundings and, symbolically, her perception of reality. The staircase in Vertigo. In Vertigo, 1958, Alfred Hitchcock uses the spiraling staircase as a powerful visual motif that mirrors the character's psychological descent, particularly that of the protagonist, Scotty Ferguson, played by James Stewart. The staircase is much more than just a physical object in the film. It becomes a symbol of the spirals of obsession, guilt, and emotional unraveling that consume Scotty. Throughout the film, Scotty's mental state is portrayed as unstable and increasingly obsessive, especially as he becomes fixated on the mysterious Madeline Elster. As Scotty descends into the depths of his obsession, the staircase, specifically the spirals of the staircase, serve as a direct visual parallel to his emotional and psychological descent. The shape of the staircase mirrors his spiraling thoughts, his inability to break free from his fixation, and his gradual losing grip on reality. The motif appears several times throughout the film, notably when Scotty is in the process of investigating Madeleine's disappearance. The visual of the swirling staircase seems to pull him deeper into a state of mind where he can't distinguish between fantasy and reality, much like the disorienting dizziness he experiences due to his acrophobia, fear of heights. The tight, closed-loop structure of the spiral symbolizes the circular nature of his thoughts. He cannot escape his fixation, and every time he tries to move forward, he ends up right back where he started, overwhelmed by his emotions and his need to uncover the truth about Madeline. The staircase also plays a pivotal role in the film's most famous scene, the moment when Scotty literally falls, spiraling downwards, when he tries to chase Judy, who he believes is Madeline, up the bell tower. The fall itself is a physical representation of the emotional collapse he's been undergoing throughout the film. The staircase thus not only symbolizes Scotty's internal disarray, but also foreshadows the eventual collapse of his obsession and the tragedy that follows. In Vertigo, the spiraling staircase is a brilliant visual metaphor hidden in plain sight for the destructive nature of obsession and the way it leads to a psychological and emotional breakdown. It's a motif that doesn't just serve as part of the plot's structure, it encapsulates the very essence of the film's exploration of identity, guilt, and the danger of losing oneself in the past. Framed shots in Stagecoach. In Stagecoach, 1939, director John Ford expertly uses carefully framed shots to subtly reveal the inner struggles of his characters, and one of the most effective examples of this is the tension between the preacher, Reverend Dr. Samuel Johnson Clayton, and Dallas, the woman with a tarnished reputation. Ford's use of framing isn't just about creating visually stunning compositions, it's a storytelling tool that deepens the emotional complexity of the characters and their relationships. Reverend Clayton, played by Thomas Mitchell, is a deeply conflicted character. On one hand, he's a preacher, representing moral authority and spiritual guidance. On the other hand, his personal beliefs and actions are challenged by the presence of Dallas, played by Claire Trevor, a woman who's been ostracized from society for her past as a prostitute. The tension between them is palpable, and Ford's framing of these characters in certain shots highlights the inner struggles they are both facing.